Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I am really excited to talk to all of you about perfecting your professional positioning with social media and PR. This is a really important skill to learn if you want to grow and have a thriving career that doesn't feel hard to accelerate, where it doesn't feel like you are scrabbling for every next opportunity. Having a really great professional presence, a really great digital footprint can make a really big difference in your professional branding. And today we're going to learn about social media, blogging, and PR specifically, and how you can bring those into the way that you market yourself as a professional. And so let's go ahead and jump in. And I want to start with this concept that every successful person has been blessed by gatekeepers and helped by guides. And this is something that I talk to my coaching clients about a lot. It's really important to keep in mind because this is the entire purpose of having a professional brand and marketing yourself as a professional and investing in the way that you present yourself online, because the gatekeepers and guides make a difference between your career being easy to accelerate and grow, and it being difficult for you to accelerate and grow. And so most jobs are filled through personal and professional connections, not applications. And so when folks talk about having some difficulty with the way that they are finding a next job, if they're looking for another job and they're really struggling with that, usually it's because the way that they are approaching their job search is mostly through job boards and not so much through their network. And when that's the case, it's really difficult for you to get a job quickly. Certainly, there are jobs that are still filled through job boards, and that happens at every level of an organization. That jobs still are filled through job boards. But again, most are filled through personal and professional connections, not through applications. And so it's really hard to establish yourself professionally if you don't have guides showing you the way to the doors that gatekeepers are willing to open. And so I want to say that one more time because it's really important. It is very hard to establish yourself as a professional if guides don't show you the way to doors that gatekeepers are willing to open. And these sorts of skills that we are talking about, where you are investing in social media, blogging, and PR, are a really great way to attract the attention of gatekeepers and guides and getting their blessing. And so that's what we're going to be diving into. So I'm really excited to talk to you all about that. So first, let me take a minute to introduce myself. My name is Phoebe. I am a career coach. And prior to that, I was head of audience at Quartz and at Think Progress. I've been the hiring manager and been on hiring committees for dozens of roles. And so I'm coming to you to talk about personal branding, not just as a hiring manager, but also as an audience development expert. And I can say from personal experience that professional branding, personal branding is really important because it unlocks this secret job market. All of these positions that are being filled through personal and professional connections, the ones that are not making it to job boards at all, or are on job boards in name only. These sorts of skills that we're going to be talking about can help you get access to gatekeepers and guides and get them to take you seriously and contribute you and consider you for these roles that are really being filled on these shadow job boards. And so we're going to start from the assumption that you are already on LinkedIn. You probably have a professional website, and you have some way of capturing the contact information of people who are interested in what you are producing as a journalist. This is really important sort of baseline to have covered, because all of the sort of blogging and PR and social media stuff really should be action oriented, where the people who are coming to you because they are interested in what you're doing are going to a specific place. So they are going to your website, they're going to your LinkedIn, they're signing up for your newsletter or your text alert or your private community. And so that work that you're doing, many of us are familiar with the idea of funnels in our newsrooms, where we're talking about getting readers into our ecosystem so that they're willing to, subscribe to our publications or do other things that support our publications. This is the same sort of process for you as a professional. The blogging and social media and PR is really about attracting people to you, but those people need to do something once you need to have something that those people can do once they have decided that they're really interested in you and what you're contributing. So that, and that needs to be something like your LinkedIn, your website, or some sort of contact capture. So again, that could be a newsletter, that could be a text list, that could be a private community. There are a lot of things that could that could end up being, if you're interested in getting those gatekeepers and guides, but also potentially audience members who'd be interested in your work. There needs to be somewhere for them to go. Another big mistake that people make when they are embarking on this journey is that they will start this process of building their professional brand without a particular goal in mind. And so it is really important for you to think of what exactly do you want to accomplish with these efforts, because they make a difference in how you do things, how you measure success, which tactics you approach, which platforms you approach. It really gives you direction, and it can help you create a useful set of criteria when you're making choices around your professional brand. Now, some people are successful by accident and they don't set out with particular goals in mind, and they just happen to end up with hundreds of thousands of followers or hundreds of thousands of people on their newsletter list or so forth. But we hear about those successful accidents and we hold them up as like really exciting examples of what can happen through just sort of serendipity. But you don't hear about all of the people who fail by accident. You only hear about those successful accidents. And so starting with the end in mind, setting a goal up front is really important to making sure that you are successful on purpose. So let's talk about what professional branding can do for you. So there are basically sort of 4 buckets that I like to talk to folks about when they're thinking about investing in their professional branding, when we're talking about setting goals so that those goals can help give you direction. So the first is attracting passive job opportunities. It's always really great when your stature in the industry and the attention that you get in the industry is so big that people are coming to your door and knocking on it with opportunities, and hiring managers and recruiters are sending you emails or sending you LinkedIn messages asking you if you're interested in positions that they have. That is fantastic. That is a really, really great way to have your career grow and accelerate in a way that feels very effortless. And so that's a really great goal to have if you're interested in professional branding. Also, just raising your stature in the industry, increasing your value to an organization so that they are willing to give you better opportunities, pay you more, give you, you have more opportunities, you have sort of more choice in terms of what it is you do, more control over your experience in this industry. Professional branding can definitely make a big difference in that. And then, of course, attracting an audience for your work is fantastic. We are all in this industry of journalism to serve readers and to help people, experience their world and experience their lives in a better, more meaningful way. And so when you are able to attract an audience for your work, it becomes a lot easier for your work to make an impact, because obviously, journalism needs readers to make an impact. And then, of course, attracting an audience that you can monetize is, often the holy grail for a lot of folks. We're in this sort of journalism newsletter moment where all of these individual journalists are creating entities, small independent newsrooms or solo operations where they are charging a subscription fee for a newsletter or a small news website or a small community, and they're making money off of their journalism and have complete control over the way that they do that work. And that's always really exciting. And that is something that you can, if that's a goal that you set for yourself up front, you're a lot more likely to actually achieve that. Now, of course, these goals determine your efforts, and we'll categorize them broadly as targeting industry. So those first 2, where you are trying to attract the attention of gatekeepers and guides, and then targeting readers. And so folks that you are trying to, people who might engage with, benefit from, or invest resources into supporting your work. And there are some places where I say readers, but if you're working in a different medium, if you're working in audio or if you're working in video or broadcast, then just swap that in with the appropriate noun. We'll use readers as a catch-all for now. But today we are, of course, going to talk about how to use social media, blogging, and PR to drive action from industry and readers to achieve those personal goals, whichever ones they are. So let's start by talking about social media. And we're going to use these two examples of Harvey, a health reporter who's working in a text medium, and then Barbara, who is working as a broadcast journalist. We're going to use these two examples as to think through ideas of ways to use not just social media, although that's the one that we're going to talk about next, but also blogging and PR to achieve various types of goals. So, of course, like I said, we're going to start with social media. So, first thing you have to do is decide which social media platform you want to use. There are so many platforms out there. You probably don't have time to do all of them between working and having a personal life, doing sort of, this social media professional branding on the side. You do need to make some choices about where you're going to expend your effort and where you're going to sort of let opportunities lie. And there are two ways to do that that I really recommend when clients are trying to make this decision. The first is just choosing the thing that feels easy. You don't want to just like choose the platform that feels easy just on its own, but you also want to think about who is this audience and where are they looking for the kind of value that you can provide. And so for Harvey, who is a health reporter, if his goal is to attract an audience that he can monetize, he needs to be thinking about where are people talking about and exchanging information about health. And a lot of that is actually happening on Facebook. And so even though as a journalist, his first inclination might be like, Twitter is very natural for me, people who are making decisions about, individual, regular, everyday people who are making decisions about their health and are looking for information about their health are often finding that information on Facebook. And so that might be a better platform for him to choose if he's just going to choose one. On the other hand, Barbara, our broadcast journalist, if her goal is to serve her readers and to make, increase her stature in the industry and also attract more readers for her work, probably the best place is going to be for her on Twitter, because that is a place where people are looking for real-time information about what's happening in their backyard. And so for her, going with that journalist instinct of like spending some time on Twitter might be a really good example, a good opportunity for her. Now let's talk about another way of talking about choosing a social media platform. So another way to choose a social media platform for yourself is by embracing the idea of being a trailblazer and doing something new and being the first or the best on or one of the first to do what you do the best on that platform. So established platforms like Facebook and Twitter can be very noisy. They can be very crowded. If you don't have a presence there, it can be difficult to establish one. It's not impossible, but there are some challenges. And so if that is a concern for you, it might actually make more sense to be first or unique by serving your audience on a niche or emerging platform. And so, for example, Harvey could use TikTok to sort of humorously debunk health myths. And that could be a really great way for him to attract an audience that's really interested in learning about health. But they are coming to him on this platform because he's doing it in this new and interesting way, and there isn't anyone else on the platform who's doing it that way. Also, he could go to a platform like Quora, which is a question and answer site, and he could answer health questions there and, include, links to his work, helping people, see more of his work if they are coming to him on Quora. That could be coming to his answers on Quora. That could be a really great way for him to be a trailblazer on a platform where there might not be as many people there might not be as much noise, it might not be as crowded, it might be a lot easier for him to establish himself there. But at the end of the day, if you're going to go this sort of trailblazer route, you have to keep in mind that the niche platform or emerging platform that you are using, your audience needs to be there. If Harvey went to a platform like Ravelry, which is a social network for people who like knitting and crochet and other sorts of fiber arts, that would be a terrible place for him to try to establish himself as a great source of health information. The people who are going to that site are not going to that site for health information, and so it would be very difficult for him to establish a presence there. And so you can go the trailblazer route, which is a really fun route and is a really great way to get a lot of attention quickly. Or you can go the established, do the thing that I'm comfortable with route. And that can be a really great way for you to build the habit of going to social regularly and, putting out a presence that is useful and that is valuable for readers, or that attracts gatekeepers and guides without it being particularly effortful for you. So let's talk about some really important considerations to keep in mind when you're choosing your platform. The first one to think about is whether there's some sort of social media policy that your newsroom has that you need to be keeping in mind. And so the best thing for you to do is to just check with your editor or your supervisor, to check with HR to see if there is a social media policy. Give it a good deep read and see if the way that you'd like to be on social is in keeping with that policy or in violation of that policy. Because the last thing you want to do is to have a really great idea, put it out in the world, and then get in trouble with your job. Another thing to keep in mind is what kinds of actions you can drive on those platforms. Because again, like I said in the beginning, we want to make sure that everything that we're doing with this is action oriented. We don't want people to just follow us on Twitter and that's the only thing that they do. We want them to follow us on Twitter and then do something else, like offer us a position on LinkedIn, or subscribe to our newsletter, or head over to our website and read our blog. And so we want to make sure that there is the potential for those sorts of actions to actually be taken. And so, for example, Instagram and YouTube are two really fantastic platforms where you can build a really deep, big presence. But the kinds of on-platform and off-platform actions are actually quite limited. On Instagram, the only off-platform action available to you is the link in your bio. On YouTube, the only off-platform action that's available for you is, whatever links might be in the description. And it can be challenging to get people over the hump of, head over to my profile and then click on this link, or, stop watching this video and scroll down, or instead of going to the next video, now that my video is over, go down to the description and click this link. That can be a bit challenging to, get people over the hump to do. Certainly, it's not impossible. This is a YouTube video. I have a link at the bottom as well. And lots of people build, fantastic operations that are, thriving and lucrative while using Instagram or YouTube, platforms that have very limited off-platform calls to action. But it is something to keep in mind that you're only going to have certain ways to get people off of those platforms to do something else. Another thing to keep in mind is, an opposite example, actually, I should say, is something like Twitter or Facebook. There are very, very broad on and off platform actions that you can take, and people are very used to taking them. On Twitter and on Facebook, you go and you click on things and go to other sites and then come back to those platforms all the time. And so it's not particularly difficult to get people to do those things. And so that's something to think through when you are considering what platform you want to invest in. At the end of the day, you want to make sure that you can get them excited about taking an action that drives toward your goals. Another thing to keep in mind is the norms for that platform. What are those norms? What do people expect to their experience to be like when they jump on these platforms? How often do people post? What are those posts like? What's the tone like? What does audience engagement look like on that platform? Again, it looks very different on Twitter than it does on TikTok. It looks very different on YouTube than it does on Facebook. And if you are going to choose a particular social platform, you want to think through whether there is alignment between the way that you would like to present yourself and what the norms are on the platforms that you are on. That you're considering, excuse me. Now, of course, there are lots of folks who find ways to be successful by bucking the norm, but there are many, 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 many more folks who end up failing because they don't take into account these norms and what expectations audience users of these platforms are expecting when they come onto these platforms to engage with the creators who are putting content into that ecosystem. And then the last thing that you want to keep in mind is if there are any new skills that you need to develop in order to be successful. And so the best example for this is going to be YouTube. If you decided that YouTube was going to be your platform, but you had no experience with video or video production, then that would be something that you would need to learn in order to exist on the platform at all, and certainly to be successful. Are you comfortable with making that investment in terms of your skills and time? Or would that be a problem for you and it's not something that you're interested in doing? Would it be difficult for you to do that work? The harder it is, the less likely you are to be consistent. And so keep that in mind. If learning that skill would be fun and exciting for you, then that might be a really great platform for you to choose. But if it would be difficult, then it'll again be difficult for you to be consistent. And if it's difficult for you to be consistent, it will be difficult for you to be successful. The next thing that you need to keep in mind is that you need a USP. And so USP stands for unique selling proposition. And basically, what we're talking about is that there needs to be a value that people are getting out of coming, following you, returning to your account, engaging with it regularly. Being interesting is not good enough. There is all sorts of interesting on the internet. There's tons of interesting that is distracting folks away from the value that you are actually able to bring into their media diet. And so if you can't demonstrate a clear, unique selling proposition to them to where they feel like there is value or there are services that are worthwhile or an outcome that is worth looking for, even if it's really small, if you're able to demonstrate that to the audience that you are, putting content out to on social, then they are way more likely to follow you, return, engage, and take actions that actually, drive toward the goals that you've set for yourself. And so going back to our examples of Barbara and Harvey, Barbara's unique selling proposition as a broadcast journalist is helping people make the most out of living in their town. And if she decided that she was going to use Twitter as a platform to extend her reach as a broadcast journalist, that would be a really great unique selling proposition for her. And it's not something that you have to announce to the rooftops, excuse me. It's just something that you have to demonstrate consistency with as you're posting on that platform. As much as possible, those posts should reinforce that Barbara helps me make the most out of living in my town. Now let's look at at an example from Harvey. A great unique selling proposition for Harvey might be that he helps people sort through pseudoscience so that they can make evidence-based choices about their health and wellness. That is a fantastic USP. And if he is, humorously debunking health myths on TikTok, and that's his way of, growing his professional brand, that is, he would be able to show up and give that sort of consistent experience to readers or to viewers in this case, and they would be excited about coming back to him regularly because they would know what they were showing up for. So let's talk about how important it is to show a little bit of humanity. Now, of course, I just said you need to have a USP, you need to be consistent, you need to make sure that you're showing that value all the time. But the truth is, people want to connect with people, not just with news feeds. And so when you bring your curator's voice, your human voice to, the content that you're putting out on social, people are more likely to actually connect with you because they feel like you're a person. And the best way to do that, there are a couple of ways to do that actually, is, bringing that curator's voice. So maybe you are just talking about news, you are just talking about, the journalism that you and or your publication are creating. But you are talking about it in a way that feels more like talking to a person versus receiving a broadcast. That is a really great way to show a little humanity. Another way to do that is to show a slice of your life or your personality. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to, open your entire life up to social. You could choose a couple of things like that you play an instrument or that you have a certain artistic hobby. You don't have to bring in, your entire family showing up on these social platforms. But as long as they're getting the feel that you are a real person that they can connect with, that is a really great way for you to sort of capitalize on this idea that people connect with people. In terms of how much of that sort of humanity and personality should you bring into how much you're posting on social, I'm a big fan of thinking about the 80-20 rule there, that 80% should really be about that USP. And then 20% should be bringing in some of those elements that make you seem and feel more human so that they can connect with you. And then if it's possible to tie in your USP, then that's great, but it's okay if you can't. So for example, I'm a career coach, and one of the things I talk about all the time are, the importance of being mindful and being in the moment and, allowing moments to exist. And talking about my dogs is a really great way for me to bring in some humanity while also reinforcing my USP. And the same thing is true for the gym. I go to the gym very often. I power lift, and it's a very difficult sport to participate in. And so it gives me lots of opportunities to show my humanity that I'm working out, I've lifted these big weights, but it also is a really great opportunity for me to talk about those really important concepts that are core to my USP, like perseverance and trying new things. And so it does sort of double duty of reinforcing the USP, but also bringing in some humanity. The way the sort of slice of life that you bring into your social media content, your 20% of humanity doesn't necessarily need to tie back into your USP, but it's always great if it does. So let's talk about the probably the number one question that I get about being on social, which is how to be active without being glued to your devices. Now, this is a problem tons of journalists have, where almost to where it started to negatively impact their mental health, where they're on Twitter all the time and the news feels unescapable, and what people are talking, saying, and doing on social just feels like it's impossible to sort of stay away, to unplug. I want to talk a little bit about how you can build your professional brand on social media without being glued to your devices. So the first thing that I want to talk about is consistency. Now, I talk about consistency because consistency is important. Platforms do have post frequency norms. And so, for example, on YouTube, it's very difficult to be successful or to get momentum and build success over time if you are not posting more once a week or more. But if that's a challenge for you, then you need to find a different definition of consistency. Excuse me. So be consistent when you can. Certainly, if you can, whatever the norm is around post frequency on the platform that you are have chosen, if you can stick to that, great. But when you can't, don't be afraid to take a break. Nobody is going to care. Nobody is really going to notice. There's all sorts of content to fill in the void while you're taking a break or you're on vacation or whatever it is that you're doing, or if there's a huge breaking news situation, or working on an enterprise piece and you just don't have time for the things that you normally would put on social media. Once you come back to that platform, when you decide that you have time for it, people will, the folks who have decided to follow you and engage with you, they will discover you again. And as long as you're showing up with value, they will engage with you again, which is important. And so instead of being consistently available or consistently present, focus on being consistently valuable. That every single time you show up, even if there are big gaps in between, what you are showing up with is always useful. And as long as you are showing up with that USP that they signed up for, then it's okay if you take breaks. It's okay if you have some stops and starts as you are figuring out how to be consistent in your own way. Another way to make it a little bit less cumbersome to be consistent on your platforms is to embrace content planning. Now, you are probably familiar with story budgets, your audience development, or social media teams definitely do content planning. Content planning is not new. It is a really great way to give some structure to the way that you exist on social, and also make it easier to get started with what you are doing, because you're not starting from a blank page. You're actually starting from some sort of template. And what that template might be is going to be different from person to person. There's no wrong answer. You could have certain days where you talk about certain topics. You could have certain pillar concepts that you really try to stick to talking about on social media. You could have a literal schedule where, on Fridays, I post a chart, or you can have a certain checklist where every time you publish something, or that there are certain things that you do on social to make sure that that piece has a presence on social, and also you have a presence on social. Now, this is not something that you need to announce to go up to the mountain and announce to the world, on Fridays we post charts. It's something that you can just sort of keep to yourself and use as a tool for starting from instead of starting from scratch, starting from something that gives you a little bit of a scaffolding. You don't need to announce it out in the world. Eventually, people will pick up on it. So if every Friday you post a chart, or if every Friday you post a roundup of the news, or if every Monday you post, these are the things I'm looking out for as I'm doing my reporting, then people will just start to get that rhythm. And so you don't need to announce it. You can let people sort of come to it on their own. Another thing that you can do, and this is going to be more useful if most of what you cover is evergreen, or if you have a lot of content that's evergreen, is batching. And so sitting down at very specific periods of time and just doing all of your social media at once for a period of time. So maybe, you can sit down on Mondays and do your social media for half the week, and then sit down again on Thursdays and do your social media for the rest of the week. And that can be a really great way to sort of box in the time that you are, give some limits and some parameters to how much time you're spending on social media. And then the last two things that I've talked to reporters a lot about, that I feel like is really underappreciated, is content recycling and talking to the audience. So just because you've published on something once, or just because your publication has published on something once, or just because it's been done already on someone else's publication, does not mean that that topic or that or that concept or whatever, that question, whatever it is, has been answered for all human beings on the planet who can benefit from it. And so if there are still people who need help with that particular issue, still have questions about that particular issue, then recycle content that you've already put out. Repost that article that answers that evergreen question and let people know that it's still relevant. If there's a new development in a particular news event, but something that you published before is relevant, pull it out and bring it out and tell people about it. That is, again, reinforcing the USP that you are valuable. And then, of course, you want to be talking to your audience. They can really help you figure out what's important and what's not important. And that can be a really great way to help you think through how you exist on social, but also how you do your own work of journalism. Make sure that you are talking regularly with readers. I mean, I'm sure you're talking regularly with your sources and getting more information about the beats that you cover, but make sure that you're also talking about the readers who are supposed to be benefiting from that journalism so that you can hear what problems and questions and thoughts they have about the topics that you are covering. And then, of course, if the target audience that you are trying to reach are gatekeepers and guides, reach out to them as well and talk to them about what's important to them. What do they want to see from the industry? What do they want to see from professionals who show lots of potential? And having those casual conversations, 15 minutes here, 30 minutes there, every couple of weeks, can really make sure that the effort that you're putting into building your professional brand on social is actually useful. So let's move on to talking about blogging. So a big question that I get a lot of folks asking when I'm talking to them about professional branding is that they're surprised that I'm saying that a journalist who's already putting out journalistic works onto the internet or onto the airwaves, if you're on radio or if you're in television, why does that person need to blog? Well, there are a few different ways that you can approach blogging, and all of them can still reinforce this idea that these goals that you are trying to achieve, whether you are targeting industry or whether you are targeting audiences. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's right for everyone. So let me take a second to talk through who should really consider blogging as a really strong way of enhancing their professional brand and who it might not be as great for. So if you are looking to grow your stature in the industry, if you're looking to attract passive job opportunities, it is a really great idea to think about blogging about the industry. And there are a couple of ways that you can do that. You can talk about the industry more broadly. You can talk about your particular specialty. If there is an affinity group or a community that you really care about, you can talk about how journalism interacts with them. And having that be a completely separate blog where you are just talking about what's happening in the industry is a really great way for you to attract the interest of people who staff the industry. So hiring managers and recruiters will see you as credible and competent and dedicated to this industry and dedicated to your craft if you are spending additional time talking about what is happening in the industry. Another thing that can be really useful, another way of getting that same outcome, even if you don't want to necessarily do industry commentary, because that definitely can be a little bit of a hot button, is talking about best practices. How do you actually practice the craft of journalism? There are two ways that this is really powerful. One is that it's a really just a really great way to pay it forward. If you have skills that young, new, transitioning journalists need, then putting that out into the world can be a really great service to the generation that's behind you that is coming up to continue to serve society by telling these important stories. But it also is a really great calling card that you take journalism seriously and you're good at it. If you do a story that's about this is how I approach sourcing, and it's a really fantastic story that all sorts of people are sharing about, oh my gosh, this is a really great blog about sourcing. And that is a really great way for hiring managers and recruiters to say, okay, this is a person who's really good at journalism. They're good at the craft. They care about doing it well. And it's a really fantastic way of showing that's way more effective than a resume or a cover letter. And so a best practices blog is one that's a really great one for you. Another one to consider if if you'd like to express some interest in something, if you're trying to attract industry or people who are separate from journalism or separate from what you report on is having what I call a silo blog, where you just have a completely separate blog that's just about like whatever thing that you do. And it's not so much about, journalism or attracting the industry and people from the industry. It's more about attracting an audience around whatever thing you're passionate about, potentially an audience that you can monetize in the future. A really great example of someone who does this, although I don't think that she has any intention of leaving the industry anytime soon, is Dominique Sachs, who is an evening news anchor in Houston. And she has a whole sort of silo about fashion and beauty and lifestyle. She has 1.5 million followers on YouTube and like 200 something followers on Instagram. And she just talks about, fashion and beauty and lifestyle. Her Twitter, which is sort of co-branded with her news station, is very newsy. Every once in a while you get a little bit of her, personality, a little bit of other things that she's doing that's sort of that fashion, beauty, lifestyle stuff, but it's very newsy. But her YouTube and her Instagram are very much about, her fashion and beauty and lifestyle stuff. That is a large enough audience that if she wanted to, she could leave news and just be sort of a fashion beauty blogger if she wanted to. And so this is a topic that she cares about, that she's invested in, that she wants to have, put energy in that direction, while she also does this craft of journalism, for her local news station. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there does need to be sort of a separate place, because those are two very different USPs. When you think about how she exists on Twitter, where she is, she's really in her sort of journalism world as a news anchor, she's talking about what's happening in Houston. It makes sense for that USP to just exist on Twitter. But then when you go over to her YouTube and her Instagram, USP is totally different. And it's really just about, for anyone who's interested in fashion and beauty and lifestyle, it's okay to have that silo blog if a goal for you is to attract an audience that you can monetize in the future, but the audience itself is not necessarily interested in your journalism specifically. Another question I get all the time when I'm talking about blogging is where you should do it. And so the truth is, the best place for you to do your blog is going to be on your own site, because that's going to be a place you own. Another really great place to do it is LinkedIn articles. And so a lot of folks don't know that you can blog on LinkedIn, but you can. If you go to your LinkedIn site right now, it'll have that little box at the top where you can put in a post. There is a button at the bottom of that sort of dialog box that says article. And when you click it, it'll open up into a full text editor like a blog post. And when you publish that blog, it has its own URL, just like a blog post or a news article or anything else. And those LinkedIn articles can be shared all across the internet the same way any sort of other blog can. But that LinkedIn article also is linked to your LinkedIn account. And so if a recruiter or a hiring manager comes to your LinkedIn and sees that you wrote this, 500-word blog about how you approach sourcing, that is a really good calling card for a fantastic journalist who is worthy of, sending a message that they're interested in, talking to you about a particular role. And so if you don't have a website, or if you don't want to put a blog on your website, I recommend as your second next step to do that blog on your LinkedIn. But again, make sure that if you're going to be doing LinkedIn articles as your blog, you should be focused on industry. So you don't want to do a silo blog where you're talking about some random other topic that has nothing to do with your journalism on LinkedIn, because that sort of muddies the waters. But if you're talking about industry and best practices on your LinkedIn articles, that can be really effective in reinforcing to hiring managers or recruiters who are coming to your LinkedIn account that you are a fantastic candidate for whatever opportunity, they are thinking about. A lot of folks ask me about Medium. Would it be useful to start on Medium? Medium is a really great blogging platform, but I'm a big fan of making sure that as much as possible, you are building an audience on a platform that you actually own, where you really own the data there. And so you own your website, you own your newsletter, you own a private community or a text list. Those are things that you own. And so I don't love the idea of building more content out on rented land. And so this idea of like rented versus owned land, let me take a second to explain that. So rented land is any sort of digital presence that you've built that you don't actually own. So your Twitter account, you don't actually own that. At any point, Twitter could say, we don't want this user on the platform anymore. It doesn't matter that they have, 20 million followers, goodbye. And then you no longer have access to the audience that you have built. And those kinds of platforms, social media platforms, it's still important to use them because that's where a lot of people are. But as much as possible, again, that's why we're talking about this being action oriented. You want to bring those people from that rented land and have them join you on land you actually own. So on your website, on your newsletter, on your text context list, on your private community. And I make an exception for LinkedIn articles because it's such a great opportunity to make a great impression on recruiters and hiring managers. But my preference and the thing that I recommend for folks on who are interested in using blogging to improve their professional positioning is to do it on your own site. Because even if you do it on your own site, you can still post that blog post to LinkedIn and then use that as a way of, it can have the exact same effect on recruiters and hiring managers. But then the people who are coming to those websites, that traffic that's coming to that blog, whether it's a ton of traffic or a little traffic, you can actually capitalize it on a way that makes sense for you and your goals. Another thing that people ask a lot when I'm talking about blogging for professional branding is, should you do a blog or should you do a newsletter? And it really just depends. They have different pros and cons. Newsletters have some discoverability issues. People need to find your newsletter. The content that you've already put out in your newsletter is just like out in the email tubes and is not really available for other people to find or peruse for the most part, unless you have a blog component where you are putting sort of that legacy email content out in a public way. And in that case, you need a blog anyway. But then on the other hand, reading a blog is not a particularly intimate experience. It's kind of difficult to build a habit around a blog. And so there are some challenges there. And so I would really recommend thinking about what your goals are, thinking about what you feel comfortable doing, and then go in the direction that you feel most comfortable in. As long as you're doing it on owned land instead of rented land, whatever investments you make in that are going to be investments that will still pay off for you. And it's just going to be a matter of time and a matter of magnitude. Another question I get all the time is how often should you be blogging if you're going to be doing an industry blog? In my opinion, you should be doing it at least once a quarter, but as often as once a week. More than once a week, then you may as well be like Neiman Lab or Pointer. But if you are coming in once a week, a couple times a month, monthly, quarterly, something like that, then you can come in when you have something really meaningful to say. And then that blog just lives on your website and can continue to sort of compound over time as you are building more and more blogs to show this portfolio of you being really invested in the industry. And so again, I want to reinforce, since I just talked about frequency, that it's more important to be consistently valuable, show up with something valuable every time, than to be consistently present, putting things out just to hit a sort of frequency threshold. And so if like long term, I'd really love to be able to do this once a week, but right now I really can't do more than once a month, that is totally fine. You can change your frequency as it relates to you, how things make sense for you. And then, of course, you want to make sure that you remember your goals. It might not the numbers that you might be thinking about when you're thinking about comparing what you're doing for your professional brand versus what the kinds of numbers that you might see at work are going to be really, really different. But remember, that's okay, especially if you're starting from scratch and especially if you're targeting industry. It actually doesn't matter if, only 5 people read your blog, if all 5 about sourcing, if all 5 of those people are hiring managers who are looking for a reporter who's really great at sourcing. So don't get caught up in the numbers. Make sure that you keep your goals in mind and allow the growth to happen through the investments that you make in those platforms. So now let's talk about PR. So I love DIY public relations. I think it is a really fantastic way to build your personal brand. When you think about PR, when we think about PR, we tend to think about the crappy PR pitches that we get. But I'm inviting you to think about it sort of like the platonic ideal of PR, which is really about helping people, getting exposure for yourself through media. And so, of course, there's legacy where it's TV, radio, and print. It's really difficult to break into TV, radio, and print. The best way to do it, honestly, if you've had no experience on television, if you had no experience on radio, the best time for you to sort of get your first opportunity is actually going to be over the holidays, because that's when sort of the big guns that they would normally call to talk about a subject are going to be sort of out on vacation doing whatever it is that they do, and they're going to need to take the person who's available. And if you show up as available, then they're going to be more likely to invite you onto that television show or onto that radio broadcast. With print, that's a lot easier. You can show up, you can pitch something freelance. You can, that is a lot easier for people to sort of break into, where you can have an opportunity to get exposed to another audience. But TV and radio is a bit more challenging. And so I really love helping people focus on some of these secondary new media opportunities that are can really provide lots of really great exposure to new audiences, especially if the thing that you're trying to attract are audiences who are interested in your work and audiences who that you can monetize in the future. And so the most important thing here is to not be snobby. Yes, we work in newsrooms that are highly polished and that adhere to journalistic standards, and that is a really great opportunity that we have to reach audiences. But don't be afraid of reaching out to independent blogs, independent podcasts, YouTubers, social media influencers, and who are talking about the same types of, who either are connected to the kinds of audiences you'd like to attract for yourself, or are talking about the kinds of topics that you want to be talking about in your social media or in your beat. And we know that this is something that works. President Biden has gone on a big PR spree talking to social media influencers. It's been really interesting to him to see, to encourage people to get vaccinated. And so that's just new age PR. That's the way that things are being done these days. And so there's nothing wrong with you, with Harvey as a health reporter, spending some time with a YouTuber who has a YouTube channel about health, talking to her about various aspects of pseudoscience and the problems that can come up with that, and how people can be helpful, and how he can be helpful in helping people make better evidence-based decisions, about their health. And so it's a really important to sort of, take in those opportunities, because those are opportunities for you to get exposure to a new audience that you can serve and potentially monetize in the future. Another one that's really great, especially if you want to target industry, is schools, conferences, and community organizations. Those can be really great ways for you to do more speaking. If you want to, expose yourself to new audiences, if you want to be able to display that you are, a polished professional and that you are really great and have a lot of expertise in your particular beat, this contacting schools, conferences, and community organizations and making yourself available for speaking is a really great way to do that. And then, of course, you can take those, if those speaking opportunities are out on the internet afterwards, maybe there's a replay or something like that. That is also something that you can put on your website, that you can put on your LinkedIn, that you can put on your social media to, again, demonstrate to the industry that you are a serious player. And it's really just easy to do that. Oh, and also, I almost forgot, industry groups like associations and publications can also be a really great way for you to target additional industry. And so at the end of the day, what a bad PR pitch is. We've all been on the receiving end of a bad PR pitch. And so if you want to pitch yourself to new media, so blogs, podcasts, YouTube, social media, or if you want to pitch yourself to schools, conferences, community organizations, industry associations, or publications, then you just need to do the opposite of the really terrible PR pitches that we receive in our inboxes every day. You want to make sure that you're relevant, valuable, specific, and concise, so that people know they take the time to actually read your pitch. They understand that it's actually that the thing that you're offering is going to be useful to their audience, and they're excited to get back to you and give you an opportunity. This is another situation where I want to just throw up the flag that you want to make sure that you figure out what your company's policy is around this. If they have, talk to your supervisor, if you have a comms team, talk to those folks and let them know, I'd like to do some more speaking, and I'm going to, reach out to some folks to talk to them to potentially do some speaking. Are there any issues that I should know about? Or can you help me with this? And so make sure that you, check in with your company and make sure that there are no policies that you need to be aware of to get that done. And so lastly, I want to reinforce that, and I've talked about this, several times, but I want to reinforce it one more time, that it is really important that you have some owned land to send these people to. A LinkedIn, a website, some sort of content capture, contact capture, so that people can build an actual relationship with you, a relationship that you actually own. That is extremely important. And so we're doing this social media, we're doing this blogging, we're getting all of these opportunities from our PR, our DIY PR pitches. There needs to be some sort of action that those people can take that benefits you. And so make sure, if you haven't built a website, if you don't have your LinkedIn really solid, if you don't have any way to capture the contact information of people who are interested in keeping up with you, that should be where you start first. And then you can come back to some of the things that we've talked about in the past. If you're interested in learning more about this, then I encourage you to come over to my website. I have in my community, I talk a ton about digital marketing and how to use digital marketing to grow your career, including having a really fantastic LinkedIn, building your website, and potentially building a newsletter for yourself as well. And so that is pretty much it that we're going to talk about today. If you have any questions, now is a really great time to drop them in the chat. I want to also invite you all to head over to my website and head to my community, because today this month in June, we are going to be going really, really deep into all of these practices. We're learning more about how you can create a social media plan that gets you jobs, how you can create a blog that grows your experience and stature in the industry, and of course, how you can find really fantastic opportunities to access other people's audiences through DIY PR, to get access, to get audiences for yourself, to create speaking opportunities for yourself, and to grow your stature in the industry. And of course, also, if you're looking for one-on-one support on moving forward in your career, building your personal brand, or just figuring out what your next step would be, I would love to help you. And you can head over to betterwithphoebe.com to learn more about how. So thank you all so much for coming. I hope that this has been an enjoyable and useful webinar for you. And then, of course, if you have any questions, you feel free to drop me a line at phoebe@betterwithphoebe.com, or to come over to my website to learn more. I'll talk to all of you soon. Bye.